So it was on a night like tonight, where we were gathering together. We had a great time, wonderful food, wonderful friends and family, and stories were great and everything, all in anticipation for Christmas tomorrow. And my dad looked at me and said, "Well, it's time for bed." My sister Sarah was already upstairs because she's an overachiever, so she was up there, and so I said goodnight to everyone, and then I went out with my dad, and we were going over to the stairway, and I stopped and I looked at the grandfather clock. Now, this isn't like a digital Apple grandfather clock. It's like a real grandfather clock. It's like wood that was from Germany, and the workings were all Swiss made, and it had an amazing pendulum on it that I used to love go back and forth and everything, and then especially the sound that it made. The gongs were just beautiful. So I looked at that, and it read, about 11:45, and I thought, okay. And my dad and I started walking up the stairs, and see, our stairs, we have like 10 stairs, and I knew right where to step so that it didn't make any sound, right? My dad would just walk up the stairs, and he'd go creak, 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 creak. But I was stepping here and stepping there and making sure that no one could hear me, because that was really stealth, and I like to do that. So we got up to the top of the stairs. Sarah's bedroom was on the right, my bedroom was on the left. And so my dad took me in there, and I crawled into bed, and he tucked me in, and he said, "Okay, now go to sleep, because you know who comes tonight and who's going to, what we're going to do tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, yes, it'll be fine. I'll go to sleep and stuff." And so he went out the door, and he closed the door, and I heard him go squeaking back down the stairs to gather with everyone. And I lay in bed, and I wasn't ready to go to sleep yet. I was listening for a sound. And I listened. See, it was a sound that a friend of mine said I would never hear. I was listening for the sound of Santa's sleigh bells, and he said, "Well, there is no Santa." And I knew he was wrong. And so there I lay in bed, and my breathing was slow and shallow. And I lay there listening. And then I was just at that place where you're not sure whether you're asleep or awake, and suddenly I heard a sound, and I sat up, and I looked around, I listened again for the sound of the ringing bells of Santa's sleigh, but it was more screeching metal and hissing steam. That's wonderful. And I looked out of my window, and there, in front of my house, was a train. And it stopped, and a conductor stepped out of it and looked up at me and looked at his watch and signaled for me to come down. And I said, me? And I got up, and I put on my robe and my slippers, and I went to the door, and I looked again to make sure, and he was going, come on. And so I went through the door, and I closed it really quietly, and then I got to the stairs. And just at that time, the grandfather clock was beginning to strike midnight. So I took my first step, and the clock went, bong. Second step, bong. Third step, bong. Fourth step, bong. Fifth step, bong. Sixth step, bong. Seventh step, bong. Eighth step, bong. Ninth step, bong. 10th step, bong. 11th step, bong. I was at the door, and I closed it behind me. And it was cold outside. I pulled my robe up around me, and I looked at the conductor, and he said, "Are you coming? Come on." And the snow was deep in front of us, so I scampered through the snow, leaving deep footprints, and I got to the conductor, and I said, "But where are we going?" And he said, to the North Pole. This is the Polar Express." And he reached his hand down, and he brought me aboard. And I went in, and there were children from all around the world. They were from Brazil. They were from everywhere you can imagine. And I got on board, and I found my seat and everything, and children were laughing and singing Christmas carols, and we were drinking hot chocolate that was so thick and rich, and eating candy with nougat centers as white as snow. And just then we heard the whistle And we felt a jerk and the train started to move. And I looked out the window and I saw my house get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it vanished in the cold. And we were on our way. We were traveling through the forest where scared white rabbits were hiding and lean, hungry wolves were hunting. And we traveled faster and faster through the forest until we started to climb into the foothills. And we climbed higher and higher and higher and higher until you could almost touch the moon. We got to the top, and then we started to race down the other side. Faster and faster the Polar Express went. And more, we sang and sang, and we drank hot chocolate and ate candy. It was amazing. And then suddenly we flattened out, and we were traveling across this flat plain of frozen ice. And I asked the conductor, I said, where are we? And he said, well, this is the Great Polar Ice Cap. And so we traveled faster and faster, and in the distance, we saw this tiny glimmer. And I wasn't sure whether it was a mirage of the northern lights or what, but yes, and when people sneezed, we said, bless you, bless you. So, there was one kid in the back who just kept sneezing all the time. And I wanted him to move to the other car, but there wasn't one. So we looked at it, and the light got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I looked at the conductor and said, what are those lights? And he said, oh, that's the North Pole. The North Pole, where all the toys are made. He said, that's absolutely right. And as we got there, it was bigger and bigger and bigger. And we saw all of these buildings, factories where all of the toys were made. And they were labeled. You had Apple over here. You had Microsoft over there. And some of the big names of them, you know? And then you had the elves everywhere. But that was kind of funny because we didn't see the elves anywhere. We just saw the buildings. And so we looked at the conductor and we said, where are the elves? And he said, oh, they've gathered in the center of the city. And we said, well, what are they doing in the center of the city? And he said, well, that's where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas. Who gets the first gift of Christmas? And he said, well, he will choose one of you. So we got really excited, and all of a sudden, one of the kids on the other side of the train yelled, elves! And he was pressed up against the window, and we all ran to that side of the train, and the train went, and we looked out, and there were thousands of elves everywhere. And the train had to slow down, so crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. And so the train came to a halt, and we looked out, and the conductor helped us get off the train, and we were moving through the elves. Excuse me, I have to be really polite around elves. So we moved through all the elves, and we got to the edge of the circle, and it was like, oh my goodness, look at this huge circle. And then there was a commotion on the other side, and we looked, and there was all sorts of ruckus going on and things, and suddenly the elves moved to the side, and there was Santa Claus. I knew it. And I looked, and there was his sleigh and his reindeers, and they were just ready to rock and roll. Their bells were ringing, and their heads were turning around, and Santa started walking around the circle. And he was walking around, and talking and smiling and waving and walking around. He got closer and kept walking around and looking at kids and looking at elves, and then suddenly he got right in front of me. And he looked and he said, let's have this child here. Oh, I was so excited. And Santa jumped up in his sleigh, and the elves helped me up, and he put me up on his lap. And he said, well, what would you like for Christmas? And I said, because I knew I could have anything I wanted. Anything. Especially friends down in Olympia, like Holly and Demi.
Are they on?
I see them right now. Yeah. So, but my friends weren't there with me. This was my choice. I got to choose my gift. So that was it. So I was thinking, okay, what do I want? there, you know, the just new video games and all those things came to mind and stuff. But really, there was only one thing that I wanted, and that was a bell from Santa's sleigh. So I said, well, I'd like to have a bell, please. And he just thought that was the greatest thing. And he looked over at one of the elves and he said, cut a bell off that reindeer right there. And so the elf pulled out his Swiss Army knife, which is a very handy knife to have. Just want to, put it out there for you. Swiss Army, you can't go wrong without it. So the elf cut the bell, tossed it up. Santa grabbed the bell and held it high above his head. And he looked at everyone and he said, the first gift of Christmas. And the elves roared their approval. The sound was deafening. It was amazing. So he gave me the bell and I put it in my robe and he said, okay, time to go. And he set me down and I got off and the elves helped me back over to the conductor. Oh, it was exciting. And then we watched Santa and we knew it was time for him to go. The sleigh was laden with toys. It was amazing. And so all of a sudden, Santa just grabbed the whip, held the reins, and he cracked the whip above the reindeers' heads. And they just started to pull. And he went on, ready? Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, on Comet and Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. And the sleigh moved around in a small circle, and then it went faster and faster and faster and picked up, and it just went faster, and the reindeers were making the most amazing sounds. Santa was ho, ho, ho! And he just went higher and higher and higher until he vanished in the cold, dark, polar sky. Wow. I knew it. And suddenly we heard a train whistle telling us to get back on board. It was time to go home. So we went back and the conductor made sure we were all there doing a head count. Okay, 258, 259. Let's go. Here we are. So we hop on board and the train gets a sudden lurch like that. Wasn't quite ready to go yet though. The train just lurched. We don't know why.
There are no seatbelts on yet.
And so one of the kids said, "Oh, you got a bell from Santa's sleigh. Let's see the bell." And so I put my hand in my pocket and there was a hole in my pocket. I lost the bell. And he said, "Don't worry. We'll go out and find it. Come on, kids, let's." And suddenly the train gave a sudden lurch, whistle, and we started moving home. Oh, I was so sad. And the other kids, they were eating cookies and candy with no nougat centers, and they were okay. But I was just bummed. I lost the bell, and so we got close to my house, and I looked out the window, and my house got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and there it was. Oh, and I thought, oh my goodness. So the conductor said, "Well, you're home. Time to go." And so he helped me down, and as I started walking up to the door, I expected to see my footprints that I had left, because I had to have left really deep footprints in the snow, and the sky was clear, so it hadn't snowed to cover them up. I didn't understand that, but so I went up to the door, and just before I opened the door, I heard the conductor yell something, and I said, "What?" And he said, "Merry Christmas, and put a mask on, and wash your hands." And I said, "Oh, sure, thank you." Oh, that was very kind of him to remind me of that. So I opened the door, and just as I did, my grandfather clock struck one time. Oh. And I thought, oh my goodness, that must be like at the end of 3 or 4 o'clock. We've been gone for hours and hours. And I looked up, and it was midnight. That meant that I had just stepped out on 11, and I just went in on 12. I was gone for a second, but I couldn't have been, because it was hours. We were gone. And suddenly, out of my keen peripheral vision, I saw a shape moving toward me. And just by the footfall, I could tell it was my father. And I thought, what am I going to do? I could be in trouble here. But then I remembered my grandfather said, truth will set you free. So should I tell him the truth? Should I tell him that a train appeared in front of my house and I went down and I got on and we went to the North Pole and I saw Santa and the elves and I got a bell and then we got back in the train and I lost the bell because of a hole in my robe and then we went home and then I got out and there were no footprints in the sand and I was only gone for a second. I mean, that's the truth. But my grandpa's always right. So as soon as I saw my dad coming over, I turned around and I went, sleepwalking. And he looked at me and he said, oh, you must be sleepwalking. And I thought, you're so easy. And suddenly he grabbed me and he picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, bounded up the stairs, which would wake anyone up. Oh, and got me in bed, tossed me down there, put the covers up and said, now, stay in bed, go to sleep, and remember tomorrow. And so I heard him go downstairs and he joined the group downstairs, laughing, singing, having a good time. And I just laid there and I thought, what happened here? And then as I thought more about it, I just kind of dozed off. And suddenly,
Yes.
Our dog Henry started barking, and then I realized it was Sarah at my door. My sister Sarah is so annoying because she makes sounds like that just to get Hendrix to bark, and that woke me up. But she said, "Come on! It's time. We have to go open presents. Hurry!" And so I said, "All right, I'm coming." And I put my robe on. I checked one more time, and hole right there. And I went downstairs and with my sister Sarah, and we had a wonderful breakfast, and the family was there, and it was good, and we got to hand out the presents like we always do, and that was really fun and stuff. And I just figured, okay, all the presents, it looks like it's pretty well done there. But Sarah, being the little weasel she is, she crawled way underneath the tree, and she said, "There's one more box. I've almost got it." And then she brought it out and she went, "Oh, it's for you." And she threw it and I caught it and I said, "Thank you, Sarah. Love you." And I opened the box and there was a note in the box. And I put the box down and I opened the note. It's a very well folded note. "Found this in the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket." And I reached into the box and there was the bell that I thought I had lost. And I did lose it and it fell in Santa's sleigh, obviously, but I got it and I rang it and Sarah said, "Wow." And I rang it for some of the other family members and they said, "Wow." But my mom and my dad went, "Oh, that's too bad." And I rang it again. And they said, "Oh, don't worry. We can get you another one." No, this is fine. I looked at my sister Sarah. We heard it, but they didn't. Wow. It was the most beautiful bell. So I looked at Sarah and I said, Sarah, we should put our rubber boots on and our coats, and we should go out and tell all of our friends about the wonderful bell. And Sarah said, "Grandma's already got a Zoom set up. And so we can Zoom it right now. Just shake the bell in front of everyone. Do you hear it? Nod your head if you do. See? Well, over the many years, it fell silent for almost everyone. I did remember the year it fell silent for Sarah, but the bell still rings for me and for all who truly believe. Merry Christmas 2020.